The galaxy had many wonders, but it also had many abandoned places. On the outer edge of the Lyra sector, a starship floated silently, its hull scarred and battered, its systems long dormant. Its name, once proud, was barely remembered: Eclipse. Once, it had been one of the most advanced ships in the galaxy, built for battles that only the greatest fleets could imagine. But now, the ship was empty. Its engines were cold, its weapons offline, and every faction that had ever sailed it had rejected it as useless. Stories circulated in the trading stations and spaceports. Pirates called it cursed. Scientists said its technology was outdated beyond repair. Even salvage crews avoided it, claiming the ship was more trouble than it was worth. The Eclipse had become a ghost of its former glory. That is, until a human named Ethan Cole entered the story. Ethan was not a soldier or a wealthy owner. He was a mechanic, one of the few humans in the galaxy willing to venture into the unknown to repair what others abandoned. He was small in stature compared to the towering alien engineers he had met, but his mind worked differently. Where others saw broken circuits and useless parts, he saw possibilities. Ethan had traveled for weeks through uncharted space, following faint signals and rumors. He finally found the Eclipse, drifting near a tiny, dying planet. Its hull was scratched and rusted, panels hanging loose, and the engines looked as if they would never fire again. Most would have turned away. Most did. But Ethan's eyes sparkled with curiosity. He docked his small shuttle on the main airlock. The ship's automated systems were inactive, leaving the airlock doors cold and silent. He stepped inside, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The corridors were dark, filled with dust and silence. Sparks flickered from broken wiring, casting shadows on walls that had once gleamed with pride. The smell of oil and decay filled the air. "This place has been dead for decades," Ethan muttered to himself. But he did not feel fear. He felt opportunity. He wandered through the ship, inspecting every section. The bridge was a mess of shattered screens and malfunctioning consoles. The crew quarters were empty, with signs of hasty abandonment, chairs overturned, personal items left behind, datapads covered in dust. Even the ship's AI core, usually the heart of every vessel, was dormant. Lifeless, Ethan crouched by a console, brushing away dust. His fingers danced over the controls, probing for life in the dead circuits. To his surprise, a faint hum echoed from deep within the ship. He frowned and followed the sound. Deep in the bowels of the ship, in a compartment labeled Energy Core, he found something remarkable: the reactor. It was old, almost forgotten, but it was alive. A faint blue glow pulsed steadily. Most alien engineers would have discarded it, claiming it unstable or too dangerous. But Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. This reactor could be the heart of a new ship, a ship reborn. Ethan smiled. "You're not dead yet," he whispered. Not by a long shot. He spent the next hours carefully inspecting the reactor and the surrounding systems. Broken wires, scorched panels, and missing conduits were everywhere. He jotted notes, making a plan. He would need supplies, yes, but more than that, he would need creativity. And humans had plenty of that. He set up a small workstation in the bridge. Using his portable tools, he began repairs. It started slowly. First, he fixed minor circuits, reconnecting damaged wires. He patched the hole from leaks in the maintenance corridors. He replaced panels, improvising with parts from his shuttle. Each small repair gave him more hope, and slowly, the ship seemed to respond. Ethan's work was interrupted by strange noises. A loose panel in the engine room clattered to the floor. The lights flickered. He paused, listening. For a moment, he thought he imagined the sounds, but then he saw movement on one of the screens. A security drone, left over from the ship's last active period, hovered in a corner, malfunctioning, but still operational. Ethan approached it carefully. Understanding that aggression would only trigger defensive systems, with a few taps and adjustments, he reprogrammed it. Instead of an enemy, it became a helper. The drone followed him silently, its sensors scanning and reporting damaged systems. The next days passed quickly. Ethan worked tirelessly. The ship's engines were weak, but he repaired them bit by bit. The life support system, long offline, began circulating air again. Small lights flickered on across the bridge, and then he tackled the shields. They were old, outdated, and considered useless by others, but Ethan had an idea. He reconfigured them with adaptive circuits, allowing them to bend energy in a way alien engineers had never considered. During one late-night session, while adjusting the weapons array, Ethan discovered something surprising. The ship's turrets were functional, but had been locked in place. With careful manipulation, he unlocked them and tested the targeting system. The turrets moved smoothly, scanning the empty void outside the ship. For the first time in decades, Eclipse's weapons could aim again. Ethan leaned back, exhausted but satisfied. "You're waking up," he said softly. "And when you're ready, we'll show the galaxy what you can do." But not everyone was pleased with his progress. Word traveled quickly, even in the sparsely populated outer sectors. Other scavengers, curious about the human working on the abandoned ship, tried to claim it. A small group of alien raiders arrived, expecting an easy conquest. They docked their ship and entered, weapons raised. Ethan didn't panic. Using his knowledge of the ship and his quick thinking, he activated partially repaired security measures. Doors slammed, corridors shifted power to traps he had rigged, and the raiders were forced to retreat. They left behind their equipment, which Ethan gladly scavenged for his own repairs. It was the first sign that the galaxy underestimated humans. Where others saw weakness, Ethan saw opportunity. Where others feared danger, he saw challenge. And slowly, the ship responded to his ingenuity. By the end of his first week aboard, small miracles were happening. Engines glowed faintly with energy. Weapons rotated smoothly. Shields emitted a soft protective pulse, and the drone moved efficiently through the corridors. The ship was not yet powerful, but it was alive. Ethan walked the bridge, hands on the railing, looking at the dark expanse of space. He imagined what this ship could become. Not just a vessel for transport, not just a relic of war, but something more, a symbol of what humans could do when given the chance. "The galaxy doesn't believe in this ship," he said quietly. "They think it's worthless. But that's because they don't understand humans. We don't see limits. We see possibilities." He spent the night reviewing his plans. The real work had just begun. The Eclipse was no longer a dead starship. It was a project, a challenge, and a promise. A promise that humans, with their creativity, courage, and determination, could turn the impossible into reality. As the twin moons of the nearby planet reflected off the ship's damaged hull, Ethan stood on the bridge and made a silent vow. He would not just repair the Eclipse. He would transform it. He would take the ship abandoned by all and make it a force the galaxy could not ignore. And somewhere deep in the core, the reactor pulsed a little stronger, as if it understood. A forgotten starship, rejected by every fleet, had found its human. And together, they would awaken, stronger than anyone could imagine. For the first time in decades, the Eclipse was no longer just a name. It was a promise. The galaxy had laughed when they first heard about the human on the abandoned Eclipse. A human? Alone? On that ship? Alien traders had whispered in crowded stations. "It will never work. The ship is too old, too broken, too cursed." Ethan Cole ignored them all. He had never been one to follow the rules, and the galaxy's rules had never impressed him. For weeks now, he had repaired basic systems and awakened the ship's core. The Eclipse was no longer dead. It was alive, curious, and responding to his touch like a patient companion. But awakening was only the first step. Ethan knew that a half-functioning ship, even one with rare technology at its heart, would never survive the galaxy's dangers. To make Eclipse truly formidable, he would need to innovate. And innovation meant taking risks, combining alien technology in ways no one else dared. He started with the ship's propulsion system. The engines were designed for standard linear flight, adequate in their time but outdated compared to newer vessels. Ethan studied their structure for hours, testing theoretical modifications in a holographic simulation. Then, using parts scavenged from derelict vessels and broken freighters, he rewired the engines to use a dual-mode system. One mode increased thrust for speed, allowing Eclipse to outrun enemy fleets. The other optimized power for maneuvering, letting the ship turn and twist in space with surprising agility. It was an unusual design. Alien engineers would never approve it. But Ethan didn't care about approval. He cared about results. Next came the shields. The original system had been static, designed to absorb energy in a predictable pattern. Ethan modified it to be adaptive. He programmed it to detect incoming energy, redirecting and bending it along unexpected angles. The shields would now react like living armor, making the ship harder to hit than any conventional vessel. While working, Ethan tested small drones left from the ship's security array. These drones were no longer limited to patrol duties. He reprogrammed them to assist in battle, launching small energy flares to confuse enemies, repairing minor damage in real time, and providing tactical feedback. Even in a partially repaired state, Eclipse was beginning to outmatch some of the newest warships in the galaxy. At least in potential, but potential alone would not be enough. The galaxy's skeptics were not content to watch silently. Word reached alien raiders and scavengers that a human had taken the Eclipse. Expecting an easy prize, a small fleet appeared in orbit. Armed with energy cannons and missile pods, Ethan watched the sensors carefully. The ships were larger, their weapons more advanced. Any other crew might have panicked. Ethan smiled. "They don't understand the ship for me," he said. He activated the partially repaired turrets, and the shields hummed to life. The Eclipse was not fully ready for combat, but it had some tricks. As the first missiles launched, Ethan triggered the adaptive shields. Energy arcs bent the missiles off course, sending them into the empty void. The raiders fired again, but this time, the ship's engines twisted sharply, dodging laser blasts with movements no one expected. The drones launched flares, confusing the raiders' targeting systems. The human mechanic, working alone, guided the ship as if it were an extension of his own body. After a tense hour, the raiders, frustrated and damaged, fled. They left behind parts, fuel, and weapons perfect for Ethan's ongoing modifications. For the first time, Ethan understood the truth. Humans were underestimated. Every alien that had laughed at him had assumed predictability. They assumed humans relied on brute strength or standard tactics. But humans adapted, innovated, and thought differently. And that difference was exactly what made Eclipse special. Over the next month, Ethan worked tirelessly. He did not rest. He climbed into engine compartments, crawled through ventilation ducts, and programmed new systems deep into the ship's core. Each night, he tested modifications in the nearby asteroid field, observing how the ship moved, fired, and responded to unexpected obstacles. He experimented with energy weapons first. The ship's old turrets were designed to fire standard plasma bolts, predictable and limited in range. Ethan modified them to fire in bursts with variable energy outputs. Combining energy types in ways the ship's original engineers would have considered impossible, each test was more impressive than the last. A single turret could now take on multiple smaller vessels at once, targeting weak points in their hulls with uncanny precision. Then he turned his attention to stealth. Eclipse had once been a warship designed for open combat, not covert operations. But Ethan saw potential. He created a temporary cloaking system by rerouting energy flows and using the ship's adaptive shields to absorb scanning signals. It was not perfect, but it was enough to make the ship invisible to common sensors for short periods. Ethan paused one evening to watch the stars from the bridge. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him. He thought about the races that had abandoned the Eclipse, the fleets that had called it useless, the pilots who had laughed at the human mechanic, and he realized something. Humans didn't just survive where others failed. Humans turned failure into opportunity. Weeks passed. The Eclipse was no longer a half-awake ghost. It was powerful, unpredictable, and terrifying in the right hands. Yet Ethan knew the real test was coming. The galaxy would eventually challenge him. Other factions would send stronger ships, more cunning captains, and bigger fleets. The human mechanic and his ship would face doubt, danger, and perhaps death. But Ethan welcomed the challenge. He thrived under pressure, finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. Each modification made the ship more resilient, more versatile, and more alive. Even the rare reactor, pulsing in the ship's core, seemed to respond to his touch, feeding the systems with clean energy and unusual power surges. One day, as he calibrated the adaptive shields, a distress signal appeared on the communications console. A small colony near the dying planet was under attack by a raider group. Ethan hesitated only for a moment. Then he smiled. "Time to test you for real," he said to the ship. He launched the Eclipse into orbit. The ship's engines flared, propelling it faster and more gracefully than he had imagined. The colony's defenders were outnumbered, their weapons outdated and weak. But Ethan didn't need overwhelming force. Using the ship's agility, he moved in unpredictable patterns, firing bursts from modified turrets while the adaptive shields absorbed return fire. The raiders were confused and terrified. Their attacks failed again and again. The cloaking system allowed Ethan to appear suddenly, striking with precision. Small drones launched flares and repairs, keeping the ship in peak condition. Within hours, the raiders were fleeing, leaving the colony intact. The colonists stared in disbelief. Who saved us?" they asked. Ethan stepped onto the landing platform, removing his helmet. "Just a human," he said quietly. But the truth was clear. Humans, through creativity and courage, had once again proven that they could face impossible odds and triumph. As the sun rose over the alien horizon, Ethan returned to the Eclipse. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a partner. Together, they had turned theory into reality, potential into power. And yet, Ethan knew the galaxy's test was far from over. Bigger threats were coming, and stronger enemies would challenge them. But for the first time, he felt confident. The ship that everyone had rejected, that everyone had called useless, was rising. And the galaxy would soon understand that a human mechanic, with ingenuity and determination, could transform an abandoned starship into something the universe had never seen before. Ethan walked through the bridge, inspecting the ship's systems. Each panel, each control, each hum of energy told a story of progress. "We're not done yet," he said to himself. "We're just getting started." Somewhere deep inside the reactor, the pulse grew stronger, matching Ethan's determination. The Eclipse was no longer abandoned, no longer rejected. It was alive, powerful, and waiting for the galaxy to see it in all its glory. For the first time, humans were not just survivors. They were creators, innovators, and unstoppable when they dared to try. And the Eclipse, once forsaken, would carry that truth across the stars. News of the human mechanic and the awakened Eclipse spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Traders whispered it in busy spaceports. Pilots talked of it in quiet bars. Even powerful fleets took notice. A ship once abandoned and rejected had become a legend before it even fully awakened. The galaxy's skepticism turned into curiosity. And curiosity quickly turned into fear. A warlord named Korath, known for his massive fleet and ruthless campaigns, decided to test the human. "A single human against my forces," he sneered. "We will destroy both the man and the ship. And the galaxy will learn never to trust such foolishness." Ethan Cole did not know Korath personally, but he had already anticipated challenges far larger than this. Standing on the bridge of the Eclipse, he watched stars streak by through the viewport. The ship hummed beneath his hands, alive and eager. Every system had been upgraded, every weapon tested, and every shield adapted to respond unpredictably. "They think strength comes from numbers," Ethan muttered. "But humans know strength comes from creativity." When Korath's fleet appeared in orbit of a neutral star system, they were imposing. Hundreds of ships glimmered in the void, each armed with heavy cannons and energy missiles. Most crews would have panicked, but Ethan's calm presence steadied the ship. He activated the ship's adaptive shields fully. Energy pulsed along the hull in shifting patterns, deflecting the initial scans and making targeting difficult. The weapon systems powered up, turrets swiveling and weapons charging in precise sequences. The Eclipse was no longer simply a repaired ship, was an unpredictable weapon of immense capability. The battle began. Korath's flagship fired first, launching a barrage of energy bolts. Ethan anticipated the attack, diverting power to the adaptive shields. The energy flowed along the hull, bending in ways the enemy had never imagined. And the weapons passed harmlessly into space. The fleet moved to surround him, assuming their numbers guaranteed victory. But Ethan had already studied their tactics. Using the ship's enhanced engines, he twisted and darted between asteroid fields, each movement erratic and unpredictable. Turrets fired in rapid sequences, targeting weak points in enemy hulls. Small drones released flares and interference pulses, confusing targeting systems across multiple ships. Simultaneously, the first wave of Korath's fleet was damaged before they could adjust. Missiles collided with debris or were redirected harmlessly. Energy beams fizzled against the adaptive shields, and ships that approached too closely were struck by bursts of experimental weaponry that fused energy types in unprecedented ways. The battle was a dance, chaotic but precise. Ethan did not rely on brute force alone. He adapted to each attack, learned from the enemy's strategies in real time, and executed maneuvers no AI could predict. Eclipse moved as though alive, responding not to commands alone, but to Ethan's intuition and quick thinking. Hours passed, and Korath's confidence began to falter. His fleet, once an overwhelming force, now faced a single ship they could not predict, could not outmaneuver, and could not damage. Ethan remained calm, issuing commands quickly and decisively. Every human instinct, creativity, adaptability, courage shone through. Finally, Korath realized he needed a decisive strike. His flagship moved to ram the Eclipse, intending to end the battle in one massive collision. But Ethan had anticipated this. He activated the ship's cloaking system temporarily, vanishing from sensors. Moments later, the Eclipse appeared behind Korath's flagship turrets firing full power. Energy bursts tore through the enemy's defenses. Leaving the flagship crippled, the remaining ships, demoralized and fearful, began to retreat. Korath himself escaped, but he knew the galaxy's balance had changed. A single human with ingenuity and determination had bested hundreds of ships and survived. The aftermath was electric. Across the galaxy, the story of the human and the Eclipse spread. Some species offered alliances, others sent emissaries to study the ship, and many fleets retreated to reassess their understanding of human capability. Ethan did not bask in glory. He repaired minor damages to the Eclipse, upgraded systems further, and prepared for whatever challenges might come next. He had proved that humans could achieve what others deemed impossible. The ship, abandoned by all and scorned for decades, had become a testament to human creativity and courage. In a small, neutral station near the edge of the system, a young alien engineer approached him. "How did you do it?" she asked, wide-eyed. "The ship, the shields, the weapons. It should have been impossible." Ethan smiled, wiping grease from his hands. "Nothing is impossible if you keep trying. Humans see potential where others see failure. We don't give up, and we don't follow rules blindly. We adapt, we learn, and we make our own way." The engineer nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She realized that the galaxy had been wrong to underestimate humans. Ethan and the Eclipse were proof. Days later, as he stood on the bridge looking out at the stars, Ethan reflected on the journey. The Eclipse had been abandoned, rejected, and forgotten. It had been a ship without purpose, a ghost in the void. And yet, with patience, creativity, and determination, he had transformed it into something unstoppable. He could have joined any fleet, any faction, and been given a command position. But Ethan had no interest in following orders. He wanted freedom to create, to explore, and to challenge the limits of what was possible. And with the Eclipse, he could do all of that. The galaxy, for the first time, was beginning to see humans differently. No longer just a small species on a minor planet, humans had shown that their ingenuity, courage, and determination could turn even the weakest vessel into the mightiest. Weapon in the stars, Ethan activated the ship's long-range sensors. He saw systems far across the galaxy, planets in need of help, fleets in conflict, and civilizations on the brink of chaos. The eclipse was ready, and so was he. A faint hum resonated through the ship's core. The rare reactor, once dormant for decades, pulsed with renewed energy, feeding every system and waiting for the next challenge. The ship and its human mechanic were one, a combination of mind and machine, strategy and innovation. Ethan touched the control panel, smiling. "We've come a long way, old friend. And we're only getting started." As the eclipse accelerated into the void, leaving a trail of glowing energy behind, the galaxy watched in awe. A ship once abandoned, rejected by all, had become a symbol of hope, strength, and human ingenuity. Where others saw weakness, humans had seen potential. Where others saw the impossible, humans had found a way. And in the silent corridors of the eclipse, as lights pulsed and engines thrummed with power, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never underestimate humans again. The legend of the human mechanic in the eclipse had only just begun.